Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 78 of Discourse in Magic. I am very excited and proud to be bringing you this episode with Lawrence Haas. It was an incredible time. We got very deep into theory, but it remained accessible, and I think everyone's going to get a lot of value out of this one.
Yeah, this was an episode that was what I will playfully call clouds and dirt. So there's a lot of stuff up in the clouds, a lot of theoretical stuff, but then a lot of dirt, a lot of take action, like in the grind, and what to actually do. So this was a very good episode for you performance magic lovers. One more thing to mention, this is your last opportunity to sign up for the 4 gigs in 4 days challenge. So if you want to book 4 gigs in 4 days, go to 4gigsin4days.com before October 3rd. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy the episode. I know we did. Record whenever you want. And Lawrence, again, if you have any questions or if anything off the record, remember it gets edited after. So don't worry about saying this is terrible. We can stop saying it.
All right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah.
My name is Tyler.
And we are here with a very special guest. Again, someone who I'm excited about because I have been a fan of their work. I've read their books. I've been inspired. I've watched their material online. And it's really someone that I've looked up to in terms of philosophy in magic and philosophy in general. He has been a full-time magician since 2010. He's a performer, a teacher, a writer, and a publisher, all in magic. He has a PhD in philosophy. He's the associate dean at the Magic and Mystery School. We are here talking to Lawrence Haas. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, gentlemen. It's great to be with you today and talk about magic.
We are so excited to dive in, and we have different people on the podcast talking about different things, and it's every now and again that we get somebody who can really talk theory at its deepest level. So that's something that I know that we're really excited about, and a lot of the listeners at home, I was going to say viewers, but I mean they can be viewing, but I don't know. A lot of the listeners at home are very excited about. So let's dive in and start at the beginning. How did you get started in magic?
Well, my story is actually pretty unusual. I didn't really do much magic as a little boy. I had some acquaintance with it, but, it was just, toys, and I moved on to other toys and music and other things. But it was really after I'd finished my PhD and I was approaching, and I'm thinking about art. One of the areas of philosophy I specialize in is what's called aesthetics, which is the study of art. And back in 1994, I was watching David Copperfield on TV with my little boy, and my little boy fell asleep, but I like to say I woke up.
Wow.
Because I started to think about magic as a philosopher would. I understood immediately that what David was doing was a form of art. And then I also understood immediately that no philosopher, no art theorist that I'd ever known had talked about this form of art. And so I plunged into magic, first of all, as a philosopher.
Wow, that's a very interesting entry into the world of magic. Most people, it takes years for them to even consider it to be even an art form, let alone thinking about it philosophically. That's something actually I really wanted to ask you about is how does one avoid being viewed as a stereotypical magician? I watched your TED Talk, and one of the things you opened with was speaking about how you're not trying to be a con man or a swindler or win, but a lot of people have that view about the art that we do. They think we're con men and they want to beat us. So how does one avoid running into that problem?
What a great question. I think it's just come to be a common association, which is often fueled by the kinds of magic effects magicians perform.
Right.
So when I do a cups and balls routine and it's kind of like, made you look, you missed me, so you couldn't catch me, I'm starting to perform in the mode of being a fooler and a tricker, which is something like a con artist rather than a performing artist. So some of this goes very deep into the fabric of what people understand about magic and what magicians have taught them about magic.
I had a trick. Sorry to interject. I had a
No.
trick that, I was doing it. It was a trick of a good friend of mine, and this was before we were very close. And I was very inspired by it. I thought it was very interesting. And every time I did it, it was peculiar that the response that I got every time was "do it again." And I realized that the trick must have made them emotionally feel that they missed me secretly doing something. And I sent the creator this long message saying, like, I love the trick, and I'm wondering, like, what do you do to get over this, this response? Do you feel that this response means that they know that it's not magic, but instead that you're doing something during a moment that they don't know? And he responded and he said, "Yeah, I don't do the trick anymore."
Yeah, that's great. One reason we stop doing these things is because in our little fantasy world, it's going to have a better reaction with non-magicians, in our brain. But the reality is, when you show tricks and toys to non-magicians, they're not really that hot on it. They're kind of turned off and cool on it because, they don't like to be tricked and sold and conned any more than we do. So some of the problem goes all the way back. When we are little boys or girls, we often get attracted to magic because of the power dynamics in it. I know something you don't. I have a secret that you don't have.
Yeah.
And I can demonstrate what I know that you don't know.
Right.
And some people never grow out of that. That's the problem.
Wow.
That's it's relatable because I can feel that in myself. Like when I first started, it was very much so, I know the secret, you don't. I know where the magic store is, you don't. And it completely has changed now where, like, I don't want them to want to know the answer to the trick. I just want them to experience it, right?
One of the things in the beginning of the podcast when we started was we were talking about how both of us, when we started in magic, very much, like a lot of it was impressing our elders, right? Which is sort of in the lens of what you're talking about, which is, look what I know at my age. Look what I can do that you don't know how to do as I'm a 12-year-old. Look how fun and fantastic this is. And then all of a sudden the world opens up and we realize that when we do that type of magic, or rather when we do those tricks, people I like to say dislike us. I say one of the biggest challenges in magic is to do magic and make people leave it liking you.
Yes.
So let's go into that. How do we turn tricks into magic?
Well, this is right at the core of everything I have been thinking about and doing for the past 25 years, which is, on one level, I have to educate the public as a speaker, but then also educate my audiences that what's about to happen is not just going to be a stupid, mean trick made you look. And part of how I do that with an audience is I just educate them. I set good examples. Right. I don't string them along and then jerk them around by taking advantage of their inattention. And, so some of it is the material we select to perform. And then the other part of it is how we choose to present it. Mm-hmm. And I believe every effect can be transformed from something that plays and feels like a stupid, mean trick made you look into something that's like, wow, that is totally magical. Isn't that wonderful?
Mm-hmm. I think of Suzanne, the Magician's Cups and Balls versus the classic presentation of the Cups and Balls, where she's telling a story and creating a framework that you go on this journey with her, and it's very magical and not carnival game where it's like, where'd the lemon come from?
Right.
So let's talk about let's talk about building that atmosphere. One of the things that I know that you've spoken about on this topic, and I know that you've spent quite a deal of time working on turning, tricks into magic. But part of it is the making of that environment. And you explained already that you have to teach them and you have to relay that information. And ideally, I know for me, it's about making an environment that is open to play, right? And
Yes.
that we are playing with each other. And when I get on stage, when I would think of it as me as a performer, as an entertainer, that's very stressful. It's very stressful that it's I have to entertain these people for an hour. But in almost the other lens, almost like I don't know if this is a good analogy, but like, the evil clown he's the one getting joy out of what he's doing, right? Like that mentality, the same thing as I'm the one playing. I get to go out on that stage and play with these people. I get to engage with them, and that's what creates that environment. So can you talk a little bit about that playing environment in Magic?
Absolutely. For me, that's the whole guts of it, really, is to transform the performing space from one that's about, look at me and look what I can do, which gets boring really quickly, to look what we can do together.
Right.
Look what we can do together when we relax and play together and move in this, move through these, move together, kind of dance together in this interactive space. And audiences know when you're out there for yourself. They can tell. And audiences also know when you're out there for what we might call the community. So much of it is about our attitude, what we say, and how we act. So, for instance, whenever I'm performing, I'm greeting people at the door, even at the Magic Castle.
Right.
I greet every single person at the door and introduce myself and shake their hand, and often I'll even point them toward a seat. And what I'm doing is breaking down that, kind of fourth wall that people use so that a relationship is being formed.
Right,
And-
you're almost allowing, doing
Go ahead.
everything I was just saying, you're almost doing everything that you can to help facilitate that playing environment.
Absolutely. Here's one of my axioms that I teach our students at the McBride Magic and Mystery School, and here it is. What I like to say is the fundamental business of every magic show is relationship building.
Wow.
Wow.
And if you think about it, it's actually true and then truer, because really the tricks aren't the fundamental business. I mean, what it is having the audience trust me enough that they're willing to lend me their disbelief so they can have a magical experience. And it's hard. I've got to work past a lot of bad conditioning people have had. They've seen a lot of bad, jerky magic. So I'm asking them to, suspend their suspicion so that we can play together, so I can give them a gift they might not even know that they want.
Wow. Yeah, that's profound. And one of the things, I mean, this is I remember an old Jay Sankey quote about doing restaurant magic where he said, you can't ask someone if they want to see magic because they're not qualified to answer that question. And I always thought that was interesting. And some people agree and disagree about, if people want to see and don't, it should be their choice, whatever. That's not what I wanted to talk about. But I just, the premise of saying and I think that it's fundamentally true, which is what I'm doing at my best, the audience has no idea what that is. And it is my job more than anything to do what I can to allow them to experience that. And if they experience it and they don't like it, I mean, that's fine. That's a whole other thing. But I know that what people have in their mind when I say magic, and what I actually do are so discrepant. Those two things are so not the same that what you're saying is really resonating. You do have to put in the work to help fix that discrepancy, what they're thinking and what you're ideally doing.
Yes, let's. I agree with you completely. Let's take a really concrete example of this because it all comes down to us as performers. What are we going to perform and how are we going to present it to undo this kind of what I think broken image of what magic is? So the very common effect is, you borrow a $1 bill from the audience, you turn it into a $100 bill, and then you turn it back into a one and hand it back to them.
Right.
Yeah.
We've all seen this.
Yep.
I've seen people take that $1 bill, turn it into a 100 and pocket it.
Right.
Theft is not very magical.
Right.
No.
So what I very intentionally did, and a performance of this is available at the beginning of my TEDx talk, is I created a routine where I take a blank piece of paper, I turn it into a bill, and then I give it away. And what I love about this is it totally inverts the audience's expectations.
Right.
Wait, who does that? Well, a magician does that.
Yeah.
Not a con artist or a trickster who's out to further his own ends. So when I perform that routine, and I do perform it at the Magic Castle among many other places, and I create a $10 bill and give it away, the entire quality of their attention and their attitude changes.
Of course.
And is that worth $10 a show? Absolutely.
And it's not, by the way, for anybody at home that's being silly, it's not that they think that they have an opportunity to be paid if they volunteer again, It's the idea, I think, that, you're facilitating that anything can happen, right? And you're facilitating this live wonder, and also that, these ideas can become actualities, so they better pay attention, because if he says elephant, one might just show up, if he says, that's it, right? It's that, what this guy's saying might actually start happening, and we better open our eyes, because anything can happen here, right?
And on top of that, anything can happen, and it won't be at our expense. Right, which I think is super important.
And notice the phrase, at our expense. It's just the opposite of that. It's like, and I'm giving a gift.
Of course. Yeah, and we've all seen, magicians either with each other at conventions or just at shows that's full of, using the term hack lines doesn't even do it justice, because, often they're insulting their spectators, and often and who would want to volunteer after this guy was told to pour a cup of Coke on his head? I mean, I don't know. That's just a random example, but I'm just we have to. One of the pieces of advice that I like to give in magic, which is almost silly, but we're doing magic, guys, right? We're doing magic. Let's keep in mind the fact that we're doing things that are impossible, and when we're going on that stage, let's try to maximize the impact of that, and not just try to maximize our laughs per minute, because like Eugene Berger said, not all laughs are good laughs.
Right. This has been a wonderful, conversation. There are so many things to unpack. One thing I would like to pause and say is that you touched on the idea that magic is the experience of something impossible. And I think that's true. And it's worth pausing and thinking about how different that is than the notion that magic is about tricking people and taking advantage of them.
Right.
And that's the world that we all have to transcend to be a magical artist, as opposed to being a magical con artist. Right. And just to reorient ourselves on the target, magic is about creating impossibilities, experiences of the impossible. They can be fun, they can be funny, but the core of it, the essence of magic, is creating wonderful, impossible things. And that can maybe keep us from selecting tricks to work on that are all about, manipulating people and making them feel bad and look bad.
And that's almost a good lens for people to just right now, point blank, put and look through at all of their magic. And that's am I creating an impossible moment here? Am I sharing something impossible here? And if I'm not, how can I turn it into something? Or is this effect worth keeping?
Right. Absolutely. What you just said is great. Look, we have a new lens for evaluating our repertoire. Is this really creating an impossible experience, or is it really not that impossible and I'm trying to cover up the bad spots with laughs?
Mm-hmm.
What I hope to create, I don't always achieve it. Magic is really hard. But what I hope to create is the kind of moment where the audience doesn't have a reaction because they've caught their breath, because it's so unexpected or incredible.
Right.
And when that happens, it's a good night at the theater.
Right.
You want silence without the crickets. You want people to be so engaged that there's just nothing. There's no emotional response in their repertoire of emotions.
Yes.
Yeah, and people don't have a response to this in their emotions. One of the things we've spoken about on the podcast, which is one of my goals, is I'm always very, like you're talking about their response. And, there's a lot of discussion about whether or not we should be judging our magic based on the response of audience members because, they don't know exactly how to respond. But I truly feel that when somebody says something like, you finish a trick and immediately, ta-da, the thing, and then they go, how did you do that? If that answer to me is a lose, like for an example, right? That answer to me means that I've done such a poor job of eliciting something profound or interesting that they've just looked at the pure magic themselves. It's like I said to a magician, look at this cool handling, and I just didn't speak and I just did something, and then he said, how did you do that, right? Mm-hmm. And so one of the answers or the responses that I fight for is laughter, not for a joke, but almost for the same reason that you're talking about, this sense of awe, this lack of other response to this sort of thing, right? This, just the energy and the tension escaping.
Yeah, it's almost awkward laughter, but not because of awkwardness.
It's not a bad joke. It's the laughter of, like, I think someone mentioned on the podcast, but like if somebody knocks a glass of water off a table and then somebody reaches out and grabs it before it falls, like everyone kind of goes, and maybe someone will laugh even, and maybe because no one was hurt, nothing bad happened, but the tension was built and released, and yes. that to me is something exciting, and to me it's valuable to look at the responses of your audience. Some people are worried that because audience members don't have a repertoire of magic responses. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
I do.
We can't really judge when someone says, "How did you do that?" Like, maybe that's just all they can think of saying. Just a counter lens to look at it all in.
Well, one thing I think I might say here is that, there's a lot going on in the public presentation of magic, which is training audiences to look towards secret methods.
Right.
There's even a network television show that, directs audiences to think about method.
Right.
And this has been going on for a very long
great
time.
Point.
Yeah.
Secrets, the notion that magicians have secrets and secret techniques. Mm-hmm. I don't think we're ever going to be able to have an audience suspend that kind of reflection. But what I do want to do is put it on vacation for the length of the show. Nice. So if someone says to me, how did you do that? I'll say, sir, I can't tell you that. We're playing.
Right.
And when I say that, I've sent a message to the entire audience that, oh, okay, yeah, that's right, we're playing. We're not working to find out methods. We're playing. And there are just subtle ways of informing your audience that Bust the Magician isn't the game that's happening right here.
Right. And it's that old mentality of like the puzzle versus the trick, and that we are very much working on the trick itself. One of the questions that I wanted, go ahead.
Yeah, part of it is we as magicians, we get interested in magic because they're puzzles. we want to find out, oh, how do we do that? We want all these tricks with the explanations because we enjoy the puzzle of reading the effect and then the pleasure of finding out the solution. But, for non-magicians, they just don't come to art that way. Magicians do not go to the art museum. Non-magicians do not go to the art museum to be puzzled. They go to the art museum or to movies, or they read books in order to have powerful, strong experiences.
Yeah, they don't care about how the camera works when they're looking at a photographer's, studio work or whatever.
And one of the things that's interesting about that, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just one quick button on this, and then I'll pass this off. And so what happens is magicians take our puzzling attitude, which we take pleasure in, and we project it onto our audiences, and they really are at the magic show for a very different reason.
Right. So that the part of that I think is so funny, which I've joken about before, is like I say like all of us like indoorsy type nerdy, sort of a joke, but nerdy magicians like get into magic because we like, puzzling over things and sitting inside and reading books and figuring out handlings. And then all of a sudden 5-10 years go by and someone tells us that we have to be fun, interesting, and entertaining, and all that puzzly stuff doesn't matter. Right. And that's, and the joke is, really, we're picking the pool of the most entertaining people. We're picking from these indoorsy, puzzly type people who got into this solely because it was the opposite, right? Which is, It's just funny that so many of us get into magic. And the reason that we get into magic is so completely different than the way that we have to express it or interpret it. And one of the things that we've seen in this podcast, which was what excited me when you were talking about how you got into magic, is that people that get into magic later are often not into it because they have that young boy interest in maybe I'm being like gender specific, but just that like youngster interest in like puzzling and being puzzled and being authoritative. And people who get into magic later get into it because they want to be on stage or they like the art or it's exciting, and they often like rocket further into their magic and into their effectiveness, I've found, than people who have been like, doing a double lift for 25 years before they even think of taking it maybe as a career. And then all of a sudden they've been doing magic for magicians. They've been doing puzzles their whole life, right? And now they have to unlearn everything that they've learned.
Yeah, I think that's part of, I think what you've said is very true. I think as I understand this, young boys or girls, they get interested in the tricks, the puzzles and the toys, right? They love toys. 6-year-olds love toys and they love puzzles. And, they're interested in the toys and the puzzles. And along comes the philosophy professor and both of you saying there's a higher level to this. There's another level to this. And that can feel a little, it can make people angry. It can make them resistant.
Overwhelming.
Right, because it's like, wait, how do I approach magic if I don't just buy another toy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what my books are all about are not just, pointing to the other level and saying, there it is. What my books are about are teaching people how to move from the trickster level to a more sophisticated, artistic level of performance. People don't automatically know how to do it. And so I hope that my writings and my teachings, and perhaps this conversation, will help point a way for people to take small steps toward this larger world.
Well, I think so. And I mean, I know that I've been a very big fan of your book, Transformations, because it was one of the early books that really enlightened the whole getting magic out of tricks. And to be honest, it was actually a book that came in my life when I dove into a lot of theory, because I was almost having the crisis that you were just talking about the kid and the philosopher, which was I was just totally displeased with the fact that all of my magic were tricks. And I was almost at a loss. I wasn't really performing for friends and stuff because really the resultant emotion was kind of not comfortable for anybody. And I was like, well, what am I doing magic for? Like, and really, that was a long time ago. And I'm sure a lot of people, I know Tyler can relate, and a lot of people can relate to, one of those many moments when you look at your magic and you're like, I'm doing tricks. I'm a trickster. Like,
and
I
there's
don't want to be.
resentment.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I spent so many hours wasting my time because this isn't what I want to do anymore.
Yeah. I want to do magic, not tricks. So I know that the book came for me at a turning point, and there's so many things in it that are very enlightening. There's one that I want to talk about, and you will have to bear with me if it's not in this book, but it's definitely an idea that you've been acquainted with, and has to do with Eugene Berger as well. But I believe he called it vision questing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that's something that I would really love for you to dive into, because I think that it's one of the things about magic that is, and I'll talk about it very basically, but I would really love to hear you dive in, but it's just thinking about what you might do and having fun in thinking about that. And I like to yell at the Discourse of Magic audience and say, magic is fun. We can do anything. Let's come up with stuff. Like, that's the whole joy of it, right? So, and that's really what got me so excited about vision questing. Can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Absolutely. So I'll get into vision questing by first talking about a very common pattern for human beings of learning anything. And that common pattern is you look and see what someone's doing, and if it makes you feel good, you do it too, just like they did it. This is one way in which human beings learn. We look at what people do and we imitate them. The great philosopher Aristotle said it's how we learn language, it's how we learn how to behave, it's how we learn how to walk. We watch and see what someone does, and then we repeat it. Very common.
Yeah.
But it's not very satisfying for very long, because there's another whole level to the learning, which is, okay, I see what, it looks like for John to perform that coin trick, and I can just copy John like a monkey, but what do I want that coin trick to be about?
Right.
And that's where this issue of vision questing, or having an idea or an ideal about what we want our magic to be, becomes so powerful. What do I want to say with a bill change?
Right.
I don't want to just copy what every other magician is doing. What does Larry's special bill change what is that going to be about?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the reason that bill change routine I described earlier came about was because I first had a vision. I want to do a bill change routine where I give the money away. Mm-hmm. And I had the vision first, and then the technique and the multiple layers of technique came to lift itself toward the vision. So, business leaders, CEOs, visionaries of all kind, they like to start with the vision, not with the imitation. So innovation comes first, vision comes first, then you build a better machine to help you get there. So, for me, it's about getting clear about the target in my mind, and then I have a much better chance of hitting it with my real arrow.
And that's just, that is just something that right out the gate, it's a way to look at creating magic that people might very well not be doing. The idea of what you're saying is people are so quick to say, oh, this is my version of so-and-so. But what that often just means is I'm doing exactly their trick, but I've been doing it for 7 years, that now, I step here instead of here, I put my finger here instead of here, I say this instead of this.
I use this control instead of that control.
Right. And what happens with that, and this is totally outside of the realm of talking about publishing, because that's unrelated, but just in the sense of you're just doing someone else's magic, and that's fine, but the whole joy in magic is that you can do something fun and impossible, and why not dream? Why not try to take something and have fun with it? One of the things that Tyler and I revel in about this podcast, which is so funny and such a small, minute thing, but We're sitting around on a couch, and I turn to him and I say, you know what we should do? We should interview this person and do this and then post this here. And he goes, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And then boom, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then everything's done. It's there. It happened. And it goes from an idea to a vision to taking action to an actual product, an actual finished thing. And that's one of the things that I want to highlight here, to highlight in the creation of magic, right? So much of it is so rote. It's you buy a trick that excites you and then you slowly implement it into your show versus, really just saying what would be fun, what would be cool, what would be awesome, how can I start playing, how can I enjoy this?
I want to really underscore this point. It's so important. And it might be that some of your listeners today need to hear this very message. One pattern is you look and see what someone else does and then you just imitate it. Very common.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about is the way that, innovations happen. It's the way, important new things happen in the world, which is you start with a vision of what you want as a person and an artist, and then you bring it to be because of that. And everybody can do this. This isn't just for, podcasters or PhDs. Right. All we have to do is take a little time to imagine what we want some particular trick to feel like and be in our hands instead of John's hands. So, this is why I spend a good deal of time after I've read a trick in a magazine or in a book, just imagining what it would look like for me to perform it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. What would I want that to be about? You're so right. People change a move and they think they've changed the trick.
Right.
But they've carried forward the whole presentation and the whole operation of the trick, so it's not really been changed at all. So, Eugene Burger had an endlessly profound question that he asked every student at every one of our master classes. And the question was, what do you want your magic to be?
Right.
And that is like, wow. For some students, it's like, I've never even thought about that.
Yeah, they're too busy trying to figure out what magic is and not what it could be to them.
What it could be to them. What you say is Penn and Teller are some of the most creative artists in the world. Everything they do has gone through this vision process. They have, everything they do has been transformed through their very distinctive Penn and Teller way of presenting magic. And what they have done at a very high level for their entire career, every single one of us can do. So for example, what would Jonah's build transformation look like? What would Tyler's build transformation look like? What would Jonah's rope routine be like? What would make it different from Tyler's rope routine? And this sounds high level, but it's actually so fundamental to doing magic that non-magicians will want to watch.
Right. Well, because people can see when you care about what you're doing and when it's relevant to you and it impacts you. And I agree that it's incredibly it's a critical thing in doing magic, because you create important things that you yourself resonate with.
Yes.
Let's say that there's somebody who is hearing this and is taking this information and is at a loss, is really at a loss because, and I really try to put myself in the shoes of somebody who's struggling to be creative. One of the things that keeps coming up on this podcast are different pieces of advice that are really not advice in any way. So for example, like, know yourself, or do it a lot and you'll get better, you know? And those are pieces of advice that are generic and they come up a lot, and I'm sure they're true. I'm sure the more self-aware you are, the better you're going to be at stuff. But like, really, like, what are you going to do? Stare in a mirror? Like, there's nothing. And same thing for people say, like, how do you get good at magic? Everyone says, do it a lot, which is such a cop-out answer, of course, but I'd love to, I plan on doing it a lot, but how do I get better faster, right? Like, now what? So let's say that there's somebody there who is doing magic and they want to start getting better, and we want to take those two dummy answers off the table. And by the way, I'm only asking this question because you're a magic teacher and I fully believe you can handle it. I wouldn't be asking this to anybody because I think those are the 1A and 1B answers, and I feel like if I asked it to other people, they'd be like, no, I don't know, those are the ones that I'd say. So what would you advise someone if they say, like, I'm going to be doing it a lot, I'm going to try to know myself. Now, how do I make my magic good?
Good. A wonderful conversation. The first thing I would say is you don't need to go anywhere else. Just take your best trick, the best routine in your repertoire, and look at it. Just take that routine and look at it. And is it original? Are you doing just what every other monkey is doing? And maybe people will discover that the reason it is their best routine is because it is different. Mm-hmm. And it does have something of themselves and their spirit in it, rather than just going through empty moves they learned by rote. So I think when people look at their repertoire, they will find their very best piece already has some of that in it.
Right.
And then they can start to feel empowered by the fact that, I was able to do it kind of without being fully aware of it.
Wow. That's a great piece of advice.
Yeah, it's already there. The best piece in people's repertoire probably has the things we're talking about.
Yeah.
And the worst pieces, pieces have probably just, they've just gone in because, I had a show Saturday night, so I had to barf this thing out.
Right.
So that's one first thought.
I think that's a fantastic answer, and I think that it's a concrete way to be active about that sort of knowing yourself, which is like, look at your material. One of the things that I am a big advocate of is, testing stuff and playing with it. And one of the things that I bring up all the time in the argument of scripting, which I am all for, is that people often confuse the necessity to script with when you have to do it. Yeah. That you have to sit down at a computer, script the whole thing, and then go out and implement it. Like, to me, that's wackadoo because I have no idea. And just for me personally, I don't have a really good job of visualizing exactly what I'm saying at a computer versus on a stage.
Sure.
But after I do it 3, 5, 7 times on a stage, then I can start looking at it and saying, wow, what are the great moments there? What are the words there that I want to highlight? What are the words there that suck? When I look back at the playback, and now it can start the scripting process.
Absolutely.
Now it can start the... So I just bring that up to say that, the process in how you arrive at it can be whatever, as long as you are looking at your own work to find information about yourself,
and in
right?
post, right? I think that's super, because there's plenty of times I've been like, that performance is great. Every moment of my set really worked. And then I watch the playback and I'm like, I need to cut 70% of the things that I said because I was just rambling and it wasn't, actually valuable.
What you both said here is so true. What we like to tell our masterclass students after they perform for us and get feedback from us is to sit down now and take the words you said while you performed and type them on a piece of paper. Every do me a favor, and I want you to. Just put it all down there because you actually did have a script. Yeah. And now take that and just make it better.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the times I think, a routine is tight, and then I do exactly that, and I get, 5 minutes into my routine and I'm overwhelmed with the amount I have to read. And I'm like, I don't, this can't be my script. Like, I'm never going to memorize all of these things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The memorizing, what I find personally is that my first goes at the words I say while I perform are almost always too long by a lot.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
And if they're long to me, just think what my audience is feeling.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So it's because of my audience, because I love my audience and I hope to get hired, that I really make an effort to take that first script and whittle it down to every beat of it, and then and make sure it's good and effective. So my way of talking about scripting has changed over the years. Obviously, I'm a theater artist and I understand the word script, but I find many magicians, they're just allergic to the idea or they think it has to be written. So what I like to say is when we perform magic, we must use good words.
Great.
I don't care what the process is for getting there.
Great.
But the end goal is the same. We have to use good words. We cannot babble and blather like idiots or we won't have an audience. So however we're going to get those good words, whether it's writing first or speaking first and editing later, whatever it is, the professional standard is using good words when we perform our magic.
That's great.
That's incredible. I wanted to ask you, it's sort of tangential to this. I've been watching a lot of live magic performances, and I feel like the majority of what I'm seeing is a very procedural routine and then a magical payoff.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Because I guess I know how the routine works, and I don't get that, oh my God, what just happened moment. I'm bored a lot of the time because it's just so much procedure and not enough show.
Right.
So what would be your advice for someone who is trying to create an atmosphere?
Yeah, good point. I think what you say is true. When people don't really have interesting presentations and they haven't really developed their character, there's nothing really left but procedure and payoff. And so the way I approach this with my magic students is when you really understand your character, your performing character, the side of yourself you're really presenting to your audience when you perform, that becomes more of the foreground than the procedure.
Right.
At my magic show, my first opening two routines are all about putting my character in place so the audience knows who they're spending their time with.
Right.
And then the presentations, what my scripts are about, relate to my character and they express my character. So, notice we have left the realm of tricks and tricky tricks and toys behind, and we're in the realm of theater. And that's just necessary if we want to move beyond the trickster level of magic to a more artist level of magic.
Right.
I think that is a real insight, just to be able to look at your magic like that. I don't know, that to me really, really resonated because
this is a very off-topic point, but we take little sound clips from each episode and post them, and normally as we're talking, I'm like, ooh, that would be a good one. That would be a good one. Literally everything you've said
every
throughout
time
this entire
say
episode, I'm like, I don't even know what we're going to keep and what we're going to just upload. So good.
Well, thank you.
The part of that excited me so much is the idea that you really close your eyes and you put it together like maybe not like a good movie, but like certain movies that are very much character based, about a certain character. That's what we're doing on stage, and we're taking them through a journey, and the journey is through the tricks, much like a movie is made of scenes, and each, as a magician, likely we're going to have some sort of level of interaction with each scene and each trick and each person, and the value and the excitement is watching us unfold and watching everything unfold. And similar to a movie, maybe you don't remember the words, and this is I'm still for scripting, but maybe you don't remember the words, but you remember, the emotions and the feelings and things of that nature. And that's not me saying scripting is not important. It's me saying it's mega important, and we're putting on a show. We're putting together theater. We're trying to make impactful, emotional, memorable moments for people, and we have to bring in we got to bring in the whole army. It's not easy to do. We have to bring in the whole army. Something that I know you've said, and something that Darwin Ortiz said is it is like day in and day out. I am surprised with how difficult it is to fool an audience. It's hard. It's difficult to do this well, to do it interestingly, to have them enjoy being fooled, to make a great presentation, to do good magic. It's difficult. What we do is difficult.
The human brain has evolved to actually ferret out and see things that are false. The human brain is very, very good at resisting the impossible. So let me just give you a quick example. If I invite someone to watch my hands while I'm doing a double lift, and I say, study my hands closely, and then I do it, everybody with eyes is going to see it. Yeah. I cannot fool the naked eye with sleight of hand.
Right.
But notice, if I create a story, if I have an interesting character, if I engage them in the action and weave a spell around that action, I can absolutely deceive them with that double lift.
Right.
So the human eye will beat base technique every time. So this is part of why, for just pragmatic reasons, we need to use the craft of theater to create an experience that will actually feel like magic.
Right. And it's the tools that have been built in theater for so long that we should be trying to use, and that we have full access to, and that we should be, we should be studying more about theater and less about double lifts, as I like to say.
Well, one way, so one thing I could imagine is, our listeners going, oh, this sounds like so much work. And it is.
Right.
But I think there's an easy way in, which is to say, I would say the following kind of touchstones for people. First, do you have good trick material? Because you have to have good technical material to be a magician. You just do. But that's never sufficient. So what also has to come along? Well, the person you are when you perform that trick material, which is to say character. The things you talk about while you're performing the trick material, which is to say a presentation. And so really the crux of it is having good material, being an interesting character, and having an interesting presentation.
Right. And those are the things, one of the things I like about philosophy and math as well is that these things, we can break these down to just three things, right? Like you just did. You just said that's what there is to focus on. We can almost cut everything else and say, you're focusing on, is the trick good? Is the presentation good? Is the character? You know what I mean? And we've got very concrete things to focus on, and I think that's a good starting place. And I also have another thing that I wanted to ask to highlight the doability of it, which is that when you, and you might have to correct some details here, but when you were teaching philosophy, you took a class of students and you led a magic class. Is that correct?
Well, what I actually did is I started teaching magic performance classes through the theater arts department.
Right.
So,
that was what I was intending. Thank you for the details. And if I remember correctly, those students went from not doing magic to performing, and other magicians being impressed by what they're able to do and how their presentation is and things of that nature. Am I remembering correctly?
I did that for about 10 years, and the magicians who assisted me in grading their final performances every time were just so blown away at how far these college students could go in one semester, from nothing to what I would call, in many cases, very credible performances of magic.
And that should be more of a testament to the people at home, that someone went from an interest in theater to successful performing in 12 weeks or whatever,
Yeah.
right? So it's all about focusing on the right things and actually putting in action. It's doable.
Absolutely. The biggest issue in magic are all the distractions we have.
Right.
So if one wants to be a performer, not every magician wants to actually perform for real breathing people. But if someone wants to be a performer, the path is pretty clear. You got to practice, you got to rehearse, you got to create good words. and you have to think about your character and presentation. And why my college students were so successful with this is because I was keeping their feet to the fire.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
I was saying, look, your script is due on Monday.
Right.
And what that told me
Wow.
is that if people can keep their focus and not get distracted by whatever nonsense keeps them from actually doing the work, they can move very quickly through these paces. It's not the actual work of practicing a basic sleight is not that hard. It's just keeping ourselves from all the things that feel more tempting than actually practicing.
Yeah, and like if you have a vision for what you want your show to be, then it's much easier to learn what is necessary for that show, and you don't have to worry about the 17 different moves you could use in that situation.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it just makes the process much more clear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the big mistakes I made
level.
when I was starting to learn magic, trying to learn all of the sleights of card magic, and I can do a lot of them pretty well, but it was a waste of time. It was I really moved forward when I understood the specific routines I wanted to perform and developed my techniques to perform those routines for a particular audience. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the sort of like mandates and catchphrases that we play with on this podcast is, and it's a little bit of a joke, but it's stop buying tricks. Like, just stop buying tricks. Like, if you found this podcast in the deepness of the internet, you have enough tricks on your shelf to find your show. Like you have it. And it's a little bit of a joke because obviously I think keeping up to date on magic is important, and I think that like if you want to learn new stuff, but it's just a testament to saying like start enjoying, start to go deeper instead of wider, right? Start to double down on like, instead of buying another trick, how about working on the one that you have, like, and just playing with the idea of that the most important aspects of working on magic are the introspective ones. It's the same thing that has to do with sitting with yourself for 10 hours and writing a college paper, or writing your first speech in grade 8 when you have to do speech writing class, or any of these things. It's the introspective ones. It's the sitting with yourself. It's the analyzing things and breaking things down yourself and how you see it and how you want it and your writing style. And it's that stuff that makes your magic special, not the trick. And even more to that note, we talk to a lot of these creators and a lot of people that are big up in these online magic retailers, and one of the things that we see is a trick comes out and then everyone's doing it and then it fades and then people are all doing another trick that comes out, and it's just wackadoo that is like that everyone could be doing the same trick because it came out. Like, why do you like this trick? But because it came out. Like
it's the new thing. Everybody
right.
has it.
It's out. And instead, look at what you have, look at your repertoire, look at your tools, reach out to your friends, read the books you have, watch the videos you have the tricks. Start making them good. Start turning your tricks into magic, and I think that's a great piece of advice and a great core thing for people to focus on, that they can just start making magic.
Absolutely, yes. And to add just one thing, most people listening to this podcast will be in a position of performing either one trick shows or 3 trick shows. The one trick show is after dinner. Before the dessert has been served or after the dessert has been served. Or the 3 trick show might be like people are hanging out together and they want to see some magic, and you can build a 3 trick show. So my invitation is to ask all of our listeners, okay, if you were doing a one-trick show, one trick to kind of bring down the house, what would it be?
Right.
And is it really good? How could you make it better? What's it about? What are you like when you deliver this? Is it fully deceptive for that audience? And I think most people will find if they really look hard at what they already have, there are things they can improve to make it even more effective.
Absolutely.
And
sure.
and then also
For sure.
have each listener should think about what would the three-trick show be? What would that be for each person? What's the opener? What's the middler? What's the closer? Is the show good?
Mm-hmm.
So again, I agree. Don't buy new tricks. Everyone else is doing them. Look at the best tricks you already have and think about the ways we can make them better in terms of technique, in terms of character, in terms of scripting, in terms of presentation.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
I think that's a great approach.
There's one thing I wanted to ask you. I just feel like it's poignant to my magic struggles right now, and I think tangentially or directly related to what we've been talking about. But I feel like I struggle a lot with clarity, which I think relates to character and scripting and your intent and your vision quest of what you want to achieve. But I get the response of, when you showed me that magic trick yesterday, it was super cool. I went to tell all my friends about it, and I couldn't describe what had happened.
Yeah.
Right? Like they were just amazed and in the moment, but there wasn't a point A to point B that took place.
Oh, well, this is a really great and fine thing to talk about. It's very difficult. I mean, part of what happens is because so many magic products are created to sell to magicians, one way you do that is you make the techniques so complex and hyper extended, so you have 4 kickers and another kicker, and now they all turn blue. And that's a product of trying to create novelty so that magicians who already have a lot of tricks will keep buying. But for audiences, non-magician audiences, it just becomes utterly confusing. It's like, okay, so you made them all blank and then you turn them all red and now they all have faces on them and now, what?
Right.
So they don't understand all of the phases of this. Non-magicians need things that are clear and direct.
Right.
And much of what we read about and learn about in the magic subculture by product sellers is actually working against that necessary goal of clarity, so our audiences get a very clear experience and they understand the magic of what happened.
Right.
Cups and balls is a really good example. Sometimes you see a cups and balls routine where the magic is, so first the balls do this and now they do this and now they can also do this and then there's something else they can do. And what's happening is surprise is having a higher value in the routine than clarity.
Right.
Right.
And surprise is important, but clarity might be even more important. Vernon said confusion is not magic.
And we're not surprise artists, and that's something that, surprise and magic produce similar responses. So that's a really good distinction, to make sure that what you're doing isn't making them surprised, but not necessarily giving them the mystery and the wonder that they signed up for.
One additional thing on this, because we've talked about Eugene Berger, who of course was my dear friend, and
that's the next thing we're going to talk about.
Eugene has a saying about the structure of every magic effect. Here's what he says. He says the structure of every magic effect is that was fair, that was fair, that was fair, that was fair. No freaking way. Now, notice all of those preliminary steps need to feel clear and fair for the amazement reaction to come at the end. So if it's like, well, that was confusing and I'm not sure what that was about and what does that mean and what does that, I don't get that, there's going to be no magic at that show.
Yeah. I was actually going to bring up.
Excuse me 1 second.
I was actually. That's okay. That's okay.
Okay.
So I was actually about to bring up Eugene, but I wanted to bring up something related to that point that you mentioned because I feel that having a philosopher on the phone is a good opportunity to talk about this, which is one of the overlaps. So Tyler and I both studied math in university, and the overlap between math and philosophy is high. I think, and the connection through logic. And one of the things that really enlightened me to the relationship between magic and mathematics, and also the relationship between magic and logic, was exactly what you just explained that Eugene says, which is in math, each step they say that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense, leading to the final step, which makes it all make sense. And the only difference, and the same thing is in logic, right? A implies B, B implies C, C implies D. You have to prove each of those independently, and then it becomes immediately clear that A implies D. And that's how my whole math degree was. Like we would show up to, often there was something there was a proof. And I know that this is often very similar in philosophy, but there was a proof that took 3 classes to do. We did really, we spent 1 class writing out one whole proof and understanding one axiom, and then we moved on to the next axiom and the next axiom, and then how each of those related to each other and proved each other, and then the whole thing became immediately clear. And in magic, the only difference is that those truths that's making people say, yes, that makes sense, I understand, that's fair. Yes, that makes sense, I understand, that's fair. Somehow in that we're lying, right? Somehow in that we're cheating, because at the end we don't get an equal sign, we get a does not equal sign. And that's what brings that paradox of a result of a magic trick, right? That's what brings that, is that I understand, what the heck? Right, what Eugene was just talking about. So I just wanted to bring that up from sort of like a math and logic perspective, and wanted to know if you had any thoughts on the philosophical perspective.
Yeah, well, I think that's beautifully described, and it's a fine analogy. And part of the fun of making magic for me is to create the experience that something was fair, so that I can give them the big pow later. Oftentimes when we are seeing magic, we're like, well, that wasn't so fair there. Why did the magician do that? So for me, the challenge and the beauty of magic is to create the sequence of steps with the kind of clarity mathematics and logic has, so that the magical effect can have its full, rich impact.
Right. That's an awesome explanation of that. So I want to dive in before we start wrapping up, just to talk very quickly about Eugene Burger. We were I had met him quite a few times in the last year, and I was very excited to have him on the podcast. And then due to health concerns, we had to push the date back a few times, and then it was very unfortunate to hear about his passing. And it actually, while I'm a massive fan of yours and I read all your material, and really it was what inspired me to reach out to you, because I thought that it's important that we sort of encapsulate some of the things that Eugene has said and affected in magic into any way that we can. So I wanted to sort of give you the opportunity, a little bit of an open floor, to share anything that you feel relevant or important. So much that he said is relevant and important, but just to pass on to the world of magic.
I think one thing, Eugene was, I had mentioned this already, but it's worth saying. Eugene was a very, very important person in my life. He and I met about 25 years. Of course, I was a philosophy professor, and he was a former philosophy professor, and we both had taught at different times at the University of Illinois. So Eugene and I became very fast friends, and as I was performing and starting to perform magic, he was never actually an official teacher of mine. I never took classes from him. But there's no question his books and his ideas and our conversations made him a mentor of mine. And one of the reasons that I am now a professional magician is because Eugene just showed me that magic could be a great art, that it didn't have to be, a stupid game for tricks, for kids, fooled you, made you look, that magic could be performed in a way that intelligent, wealthy, smart, fun people could really enjoy. And I think that's what I would say is part of Eugene's model. He shows us that magic can be an art form for adults. And that certainly spoke to me.
Yeah. I think that's really valuable. And on that level, one of the things that resonated with me was, that he says, that magic is not necessarily always like positive and happy-go-lucky. And I'm not like a sort of scary performer or anything of that nature, but it's just a reminder that, and something that he was a big advocate of, that what we do is and has the potential to be profound. And, one of the, for me, one of the wake-up calls of his passing was just, looking at my magic and saying, like, am I affecting people? Am I really doing, trying to really make this affect people? And am I doing my best to do magic that is valuable and, really, gives something and does something? So,
Yeah. One of Eugene's core messages is that tricks are about props, but magic is about our lives. And that what I've just said is essentially a quote from Eugene. And I think that's a really good thumbnail for us to think about when we go back and we look at our repertoires and we say, do I have tricks here or do I have magic here? Or which ones are more magical? I think people will find they're the ones that talk about larger things than, and now I have 4 Queen of Spades, and now I have 5 10 of nines, or 10 of diamonds, Magic is about our lives, like art is about our lives. And I think one thing I would say to kind of, bring the Eugene conversation to a pause at least, is he's left us an incredible legacy of books where he has published his ideas about how to help each of us become better, more effective magicians. So go back to the books. Read what Eugene had to say. He was a great writer. He's one of the great writers.
I think it was the first paralecture note.
And then the other thing I would just mention to our listeners is that there's a lot more Eugene Burger to come, because in the 6 months prior to the diagnosis of his illness, he and I worked very intensely on a book together called Teaching Magic, a book for students and teachers of the art. So in late October, this new book by Eugene Burger will be published, and it turns out it will be kind of a legacy book about his thinking.
Well, that's absolutely incredible, and I'm interested, intrigued. I'm excited to get a copy, and I just want to reiterate what you just said, which is, we can be very thankful about how much Eugene has really published, and that he has, and that his efforts,
his goals were to further the art of magic, not just for himself, but for everybody. Right.
And it's good that we can. It's good that we can feel those ripples.
The one thing I wanted to say about Eugene right before we wrap everything up, it was related to something you said earlier. The last time I spoke to him in person was when he was serving me breakfast at a buffet at a magic convention. It was so surreal because Eugene Burger was there just saying, "Hi, good morning. How are you? Would you like your coffee like this?" You know what I mean? And it's just, related to your greet the people at the door and let them know you're a person and make real connections, because that shines through not only in terms of a business perspective and how that helps your performance, but it really just, it helps you out, helps you become a better person in general, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
So we have, in the end of our episodes, a few rapid-fire-ish questions. to wrap up the episode and pull everything together. Some for all of us, some for just you. So we'll start with the one for all of us, which is a favorite part of this episode. You know, people have been maybe driving their car, washing dishes, washing their car, driving dishes, whatever. Who knows? It's been an hour, and there's a whole bunch of incredible nuggets of information for their magic from this episode. So we each, all three of us, go and mention something from the episode that is of particular value. And to me, really the whole entire thing was absolutely incredible. But I loved the the talk of how we get into magic for sort of that image that you gave of the two kids playing and the philosopher coming up and telling them that, you know, playtime's over or whatever. I really love that image, and, you know, the transformation that us magicians have to go through from being lovers of puzzle to lovers of, you know, giving mystery and sharing that sort of thing. That sort of metaphor and visualization to me was really, really valuable, as almost like silly as it is, two kids playing and a philosopher. But like, I don't know, I really loved it. And I really think that we should think about, you know, wherever we are in magic, that there's someone coming up to us and saying, there's much more here. There's much more here that you could be doing. And that was very, very enlightening for me. Tyler, what about you?
Thank you. That's great.
That was the point I was going to bring up. Also, I do have other points, but just in relation to that, the importance of letting go of that ego, not just considering that there is more there, but to take your magic and make it about other people. Like, make it about yourself, but sharing that with other people, not bettering yourself by fooling other people.
Wonderful. That's a wonderful insight. Yes.
The other thing I wanted to mention was the distractions, because I definitely feel that, like, I have all these ideas, but I have yet to sit down and write out a full show, right? And the idea that you gave deadlines to your students and that caused them to actually go into action and go from, you know, zero to hero in a reasonable amount of time. So it was just very motivating for me to, you know, actually put in some work right now.
That's wonderful. Before I share mine, I'll tell you one of my sayings that I teach all of our students, which is, this is what I say: in the age of information overload, the focused shall inherit the earth.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And that's true with your magic show. It's true with learning a new magic routine. So yes, set yourself some deadlines, and that show will come to be before you know it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I've heard before, you know, that like the person who can focus deepest succeeds best, you know, like and it's really true. And what about for you? Is there a specific part of the episode?
Well, I think I've enjoyed the conversation immensely. I think what I would bring the focus back to, and I'm thinking about it myself, is you don't have to do anything new. Just go back to your existing repertoire and look at your best material.
Yeah.
And see if there are some things you can do to make your best material even better.
Yeah,
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Yeah.
One of the things that I really loved about this episode is that it was very much high level and implementable, like clouds and dirt. You know, like
Good.
No, but really, like there's a lot of big stuff to ponder on, but you did an incredible job of saying, like, let's take this, for example, you know, look at a trick that you've done before and actually giving people some actionable steps that is often lacking from often these high level conversations.
You're very much so a teacher, not a
yes,
speaker,
yes.
right? Like you.
Yeah,
which is a good thing.
Good.
A few other things. Another is, one of the things that we're trying to do is to keep this podcast going on for eternity. We get each person who is on the episode to recommend somebody else to come on an episode. The only caveat is you have to be able to say, here's their contact info, because otherwise, get David Copperfield on doesn't do so well for most people. So is there somebody who you think would be of great, great value to listeners of this podcast?
That's a good question. Have you had Jeff McBride yet? I can help you with that.
That would be incredible.
Awesome. That's a good answer. Good answer.
That's probably the best answer we've had so far.
Perfect answer, actually. Yeah. So few other tiny segments. One other is what we like to call a magic PSA. I know that this has been like absolutely packed full of advice, but a lot of the times we're
steering the conversation, I should say.
Yeah, well, we're trying to also give an opportunity for a lot of people have problems with what's wrong with magic today or what's right with magic today or, things that they just want to share. So do you have a magic PSA? Anything? We like to joke and say you have 1 million magicians listening. I mean, you've probably spoken to more magicians than this will reach, but
ever.
But do you have a PSA, something that you would wish all magicians should know?
I think it's something that's kind of been present throughout our whole conversation. And that is the realization that magic can be a great art. It's not always.
Right.
But it can be a great art. And human beings love art. They need art. And people need magic. So I just invite all of us and remind myself as well to keep reaching for better magic. Mm-hmm. Because if we perform great magic, there will be audiences for it.
Incredible.
That's absolutely right, and that's been proven time and time again with, when great magic comes out and shocks the world. So that's an incredible insight. And I think one of our last questions, if not our last, is the question of the week. We have an audience that is very excited about answering questions. So if you've got a whack of magicians, hundreds, thousands, millions even, ready to answer any magic question. So it can be something that you're looking to survey people on, or it can be something that you would just like them to be introspective about. What question do you have for our audience?
Well, I'm a teacher, so I'm going to ask a teacher-like question. And I think this will be really, really useful to all of the listeners to answer this question. And I will be very interested to hear their answers. And the question is, what is the primary thing in your life that is interfering with your ability to craft a great piece of magic?
Wow.
Goodness.
Wow.
That's a heavy question.
That is a fantastic question.
You guys have your work cut out for you.
Grab a cup of coffee, make a list, and think about the primary thing, the single biggest thing that's getting in the way of your doing the work.
Wow. And please, if you're listening at home, don't just, sit down and write it for yourself. Let us know what your answer to that question is.
We'll be all over social media sharing this question.
Yeah, and, if we get enough of the same questions, we'll ask our next guests their solutions to your own problems so you could actually fix them.
And if you want the follow-up question, it goes like this. What's one thing you can do to minimize the negative effect of the thing that's interfering?
Wow. One step. I like that.
Well, we basically have the whole solution right in the palm of our hands there. So thank you so much for that. And, one other thing that I want to reiterate on that note is the part that inspires me most about what you do is, that 12-week thing. The fact that students who are fresh to it learned how to do an incredible job in 12 weeks is obviously a testament to you as a teacher, but the part that I want to highlight is it's a testament to what putting in the work will do. 12 weeks of hard work is not a short amount of time. It's not a small amount of work, but it is a digestible amount of work. It's an amount of work that I can be comfortable and confident to say to somebody, put 12 weeks into this and you could have a great trick, like when people say, I put 25 years into this trick. What were you doing for 25 years? Like work on it for 12 weeks actually. And let's see. I'm sure it'll be fantastic.
That's a great message. Absolutely.
So with that, I just want to give you a big, huge thank you for joining us on the episode. It was really an incredible, wildly enlightening episode, and one that I think is one to listen to and then re-listen to and then re-listen to and really, really enjoy. So thank you so much for this gem, and it was an absolute blast to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Jonah and Tyler. Great to talk with you.
Speak soon. And of course, a big, huge thank you to the people at home for tuning in. Here's once again a pat on the back that you can work on stuff that isn't where to put your pinky for about an hour. So props to you guys at home.
You did it.
And big, huge thank you to Lawrence Haas for joining us on this episode.
We'll see you all next week.
Take care.
Well, there you go. That was episode 78 with Lawrence Haas. A big thank you to you guys for making it thus far. Very exciting episode. A lot to hold on to in that one. A few more things to mention in terms of projects that are coming out.
So very quickly, if you are interested in buying any of Lawrence's books, I would head to theoryandartofmagic.com. That would be the place to get them. And as well, he mentioned a new book coming out with him and Eugene Berger. I would keep on the lookout for that. We will be sharing it as soon as it becomes available in October. And of course, a last chance to mention, go sign up for 4gigsin4days.com. That's 4gigsin4days.com. Totally free. Learn how to book 4 gigs. It'll be fun. This is your last chance. It all starts October 3rd. Thanks for tuning in. See you Thursday.